And I turned it off. Let's see
All right.
what's going to happen.
Okay. All right. So went ahead and started. So we'll go ahead and begin. The first thing I had on my agenda was to talk about the assignment that was due on Tuesday. That was the life-changing event essay peer review. And so did anybody have or run into any problems like uploading your essay for that?
No.
Okay, the peer review itself
Yeah.
is due today, right?
That's right. Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. Because that was one of the things I wanted to ask about. Because
Sure.
I tried accessing one of the Word documents. I couldn't access the actual document. I could open up Word, but I couldn't access the document. And I'm not entirely sure how to go about reviewing them anyway.
Okay, well, so, and I did actually open up the examples. Somebody else was having a problem with the examples and opening them because they were as PDFs, but they weren't necessarily formatted. And so anyway, so I went in and reformatted them. So it should be much easier for you now to upload, and look at them. So, but so those examples should, as of 10 o'clock this morning or so, be much easier to access. But
that too,
good.
that too, but I was also referring to like other people's essays.
Okay.
A lot of people did like Word documents,
Mm-hmm.
but I tried opening one of them last night, and I think it said something about someone else is already accessing this document.
Well,
or something like that. Point is, I couldn't see anything.
well, no, I think one of the issues is, and I forgot to put this in, but more people are using Google Docs. Okay.
Yeah.
And Google Docs, it has problems when in terms of playing with Canvas because people have access issues like what you're talking about, and and it creates problems on my end because I can't always access it, or you can access it, but then you got to go through all these hoops and hurdles, and it's and it's sort of something that I overlooked as far as how to avoid. Now, sometimes people use that because that's the word processing that they have access to. Now, as a student, you have access to the entire Microsoft suite, including Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all that good stuff. And you can go to Microsoft.com and you can access it. And all you have to do is verify the fact that you're a student with with your Southeast email address. Okay. They figure if you've got a student email account, you're a student, and so you can get free access to all of that. So you can use Word and I don't know. So Peyton, are you using Word?
I use Google Docs.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
just my preferred thing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that might be the issue. And so just download the Microsoft suite, get Microsoft Word for your computer, and just operate off of that on your desk. I assume you're on your desktop. I assume you're using a laptop, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the way to get around that. And I haven't looked at. I'm going to be looking at everybody's essay and kind of giving some feedback sometime either today or tomorrow. Certainly before the weekend, so you can kind of do something with that. But
I guess the other thing I was wondering about was, well, what am I doing when I'm reviewing? Do I like make my own document and go off the peer review sheet, or what do I do? Do I leave comments on their essay and repost it, or what do I do?
Right. Well, I think what you want to do is you want to highlight and add comment, right? And you're adding comments that are looking at things more holistically, right? Is that thesis clear? Is this sentence clear, right? So if you read something and you don't know what it is the writer is trying to say, then you can highlight and say, reword, unclear, something like that. If you think a paragraph needs to be longer because it hasn't told you everything that you think you need, address those kinds of things. If you think something is good too, if it's like, hey, this is some great description, whatever, comment on that. But it's a good question because there are especially in the other classes that I've seen, there's some inclination when you're doing peer review to confuse that with editing. Peer review and editing are not the same thing. Because editing actually goes in and makes changes in the author's essay. We don't do that. Remember, for peer review, all you're doing is telling the author how he or she can make his or her essay better. Okay, so you're telling them perhaps what to fix. The how is entirely the author's job. So even if you see a word that's that's obviously misspelled, your job isn't to go in and correct the word. Your job is to say, hey, this needs to be respelled or whatever. Okay, so so that's how you want to approach peer review. So you want to make comments throughout, and then after you're done making comments throughout, then you want to answer those 5 questions on the peer review sheet, right? The one that says, what your name is, what is the thesis, is everything there, what is something that was well done about the essay, and then again those 2 specific things, how can this essay be better? And again, you want to be real specific about that so to make sure that the author can do something with the feedback you're giving.
So, okay, so I'm accessing their document and
Mhm.
adding comments to it.
Right. And I can do that, say I do a right click. You can do sort of right click on something or on a laptop. You can set it up so that the bottom right-hand corner is a right click, and then that allows you to add comments. So,
You lost me.
okay. So, do you have a mouse, Peyton? Okay. All right, cool. So we're going to go into share screen here anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the peer review, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to click on, Bolsha, you're here. We'll just pick on your essay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So
I can access Microsoft Word. I think I have that already. It wouldn't let me see the actual document.
okay. All right. So if let's say I want to, on Bolsha's essay, comment something, I can highlight it. And then if I right click here, new comment, and then it gives me the opportunity to say, or whatever it is you want to do. So that way you're making comments where something needs to be fixed, so it's more useful then to the author. That make sense, Peyton?
I think so.
Okay.
So then I also make a separate document for the worksheet, or
Well, no, you're okay. So while you're here, okay, here again, you have the assignment description. You have the checklist that's here. This is something to just keep in mind as you go through, right? Basically, you should be able to check that off. But here is the peer review sheet, okay? So after you sort of go through and give some feedback, then you want to answer these 5 questions, okay? So you go through, give feedback in the essay, and then answer these 5 questions.
Right, but where do I answer them?
In your response post.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, that would be
So
that would be the best place to put it. I mean, you could also add it at the end of their essay if you want to do it that way. Either place works, I suppose. But putting it in the text of the post, in addition to uploading your peer-reviewed copy, would be the way to do that.
So do I save a copy of their essay after I review it, or what, and then
Right.
repost it that way? Or, okay.
Exactly. So if it would be Bolcha's essay, you'd say Bolcha's essay, and then I don't know, put a resave it like a slightly different name, upload it, right? So then Bolcha can look and see what your comments were.
Okay.
Yeah, because you'll upload and attach it just like you upload and attached your own rough draft.
Okay. I did it on Google Docs, so my rough draft is just the whole thing in my post. It's not a link.
Okay. One thing you can do is you should be able to save to rich text format.
To what?
Save to rich text format from Google Docs. That might be a way to get around it for now. Because if you go into a file, you can save as, or in Google Docs, can you export?
I don't remember.
Yeah, well, if you can take your Google Docs file and then export it, that might be one way to do it too. I mean, I don't know. I don't, not using Google Docs. I'm not familiar with, how to do that, but look, see about exporting it. The other thing is visit with the help desk, the SEC help desk. Tell them what you're experiencing and they'll be able to provide you with some ways of working with it.
Okay, what I'm really concerned with at the moment is, does my essay count? I mean, I posted it, just
Yeah,
not the same way most other people did.
right. If it's there, and if it's there and it's on time, I'll count it.
Okay.
Just make sure that, for the other ones, like I say, anytime that it's the first time you do anything, you sort of have to work out the bugs. And this is just simply one of those bugs we got to work out, right? So then next time we have a peer review, it's like we've been through it and it'll go much more smoothly.
Okay.
Well, I just want to tell you beforehand, I know that it says if you don't have it 90% complete, then there's no points, and I'm probably not going to get any points, but I'm aware that that was one of the rules. So when I uploaded, it was only a page and a half. So.
Yeah, that kind of confused me too, because Google Docs will give you a count of the pages, but it counts more like it goes more off what prints off. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you have enough to print off a single page, it'll say that you have one page, and so on.
But
and what confused me a little more was the explanation of the assignment, because you said it had to be more than 90% complete.
right.
And initially I thought, oh, so it doesn't have to be 100% complete, but it has to be mostly complete. And then I was like, well, no. So I actually edited my post so it was complete instead of mostly complete, because I wasn't really sure.
Well, yeah, the thing is, if we're going to be doing peer review, we need to work off of something that is, we know the same, something that's extremely similar to a final draft, right? I've had people, for example, that uploaded an outline and called it a rough draft. What do you do with that? If somebody calls that a rough draft, there's nothing you can do with that, right? So the only way that we've got material to work with for a rough draft is to have something that, is, again, at least 90% there. Otherwise, it's, everybody already knows that, okay, it needs a page and a half, and then I mean, the author doesn't learn anything. Okay. Also, as far as if it's only a page, if it's only, say, one page, like, well, clearly we, have it, it's not even really a rough draft. It's just simply something that's in the process towards a rough draft. So that's the deal with, with the length, right? To make sure that, we're, at least reasonably close to where we should be. But good. Other thoughts or questions as we're talking about the peer review?
I have a question.
Yes, Kendra?
Well, you said you're going to be looking at our essays. Are you going to be giving us comments back as well?
Exactly, right. So my game plan is for the remainder of this afternoon and tomorrow is to look at everybody's essay, and I'm going to be looking at it real brief. I'm just going to be sort of saying, all right, here's everything here that's supposed to be, and providing some feedback so that you've got something to work with to make your essay even better than it already is.
Okay.
And I'll be sending that out by way of Canvas message. And like I say, I'm gonna kind of run through them quickly, but with the time I've got. But before the weekend starts on Saturday, everybody will have something that they can use.
Okay.
So, but good. Other thoughts and questions about peer review? All right. Well, if we've sort of addressed everything we need to, at least on that, then the other thing that was due on Tuesday was the comma worksheet. And actually, I've already graded that and handed it back to everybody. Has anybody sort of seen the feedback you got for the comma worksheet?
I haven't checked yet.
Okay.
I briefly looked at it, saw that I missed one, but I didn't look at any feedback.
Well, there wasn't basically I just highlighted in yellow or whatever where there was either an extra comma or a missing comma, right? So you knew,
Okay.
Where something should have been different.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one thing to do too. The interclause commas and the commas between independent clauses are really, really common. So as you're doing the final editing for the final draft, it would probably be useful to go through and edit just for that. And again, if you're looking at that specifically, it's a heck of a lot easier to find. All right. So, all right. So, any questions about that at all?
No.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, then the next thing I want to talk about was the evaluation essay assignment sheet. Right. So we're, again, we're sort of going through the final processes of a life-changing event essay, and so we got another one coming down the pike. Okay. And I put this in this week's module because I wanted you to know where some of our assignments are headed. So for example, like the response to an evaluation. Why are we doing that? Well, to lay the groundwork for this assignment. Okay. So I wanted to kind of also discuss this so everybody knew, again, we're headed with it. Now, I don't know if anyone has had time to take a look at this, but you'll see that there are some ways in which this assignment is a bit different from the others. And one of those is that the required length is tied to paragraphs instead of pages. Okay. And we're going to go over why that is. So that's one of the differences. Although one of the ways in which this assignment is similar to our life-changing event essay is that the structure is already rigidly in place. Okay. And so that should also be very helpful for you. Now, what we're going to be doing with this is, as the title would suggest, you're writing an evaluation, okay? You're going to find an object, place, or event to evaluate, okay? I mean, the default that, the example I use is like a restaurant review, okay? Yeah, and we do this for a whole host of reasons, right? But, a restaurant review is a fine way of thinking about this, okay? And when we do this, when you find that and you're right, it's important that you understand the assignment requires active observation. Okay. So, what this means is you can't write about a memory. Your memory can inform your observations, but it can't be the focus. So, for example, I had a student in one of the earlier classes who talked about how Virginia's Cafe out on Cornhusker Highway was one of her favorite restaurants. Okay, and it is a great place. Well, for anybody who's been there. And she talked about this is some place that she had went, her entire life, and it had went fairly frequently. Okay, and she wants to write her evaluation essay about Virginia's Cafe. It's like, okay, if you want to do that though, you have to go back and do active observation. Now, those memories you have can inform what you think about your current experience, but you have to focus on a current active observation and experience, okay? So you can be sitting there at Virginia's Cafe and say, all right, well, it's not as busy as it usually is for, a Friday evening. Or you could say, well, the milkshake isn't as smooth as it usually is, right? So you're using the past, but you're not focusing on it, right? That's the key thing, that, you've got that active observation. So you're not focusing on, so you're focusing on the here and now, okay? And that active observation is going to require that you take notes, and take a lot of notes, by the way. It's really important that you take notes while you're experiencing it. If you try to do that afterwards, it just doesn't work out well, okay? So, right now the other requirement as we think about a topic is it can't be something experienced with a screen. So this means movies, video games, TV shows, those don't count. You have to be, experiencing something in 3 dimensions, live and in person, whatever it is. Yeah.
So wait, what specifically are we evaluating?
Well,
that kind of confused me.
Whatever you want. As long as it's not a memory, as long as you don't access it by a screen,
Okay,
you could evaluate a restaurant, you could evaluate a park, you could evaluate a car. You could evaluate, you know, your washing machine. You could evaluate, you
A
know,
video game?
no,
Or is that
that's something that you would experience by way of a screen. Okay. So if you experience it by a screen, nope, that doesn't work.
right?
And again, it has to be experienced live and in person.
So when's the due date for this one?
The due date here is Tuesday, the 23rd for the
Okay.
rough draft, and then 1 week later for the final one. Okay. Now, as we're thinking about this, again, using restaurants as an example, here's where, like, you know, if you were to go out and eat at a restaurant this evening, where would you want to go? Who haven't we heard from just yet? I'm sorry, I can't see the in the bottom right there under Bolcha.
What is that?
Yeah, well, I was going to see. I'm trying to hover over and catch names here on those of you here that are on the bottom of this list. Yeah.
Okay.
So where would you want to go?
Somewhere that you enjoy.
Okay, all right. And where would that be? Where specifically? What place would you go to? Again, you know, assuming that you know they're open and we didn't have seating restrictions and all that good stuff. Where would you go?
Well, you want me to name like a restaurant?
Exactly. You know, is it like, you know, Virginia's Cafe? Is it Texas Roadhouse? Is it, you know, where?
Well,
Okay.
the place that comes to mind for me is Carmelo's Bistro.
Okay, why?
They just have a relaxed atmosphere, and
Okay.
the food is good and the people are nice.
Okay. All right. So it's got a good atmosphere, good service. Okay. Any reasons beyond you know, the service and the atmosphere?
Well, I know the owner, so
Okay. All right. So it's got personal significance for you, right? And some places
Right.
we might choose because, again, we've got fond memories there. Okay. That's all valid. Any other reasons?
cost.
No, that's valid, right? You know, I mean, it's something that sort of is always sort of on the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking about a restaurant. Because if I'm going out, I've got, you know, the 3 kids and my wife, so you know we're 5, right? So so we don't necessarily go out a whole heck of a lot because, you know, it gets really expensive really fast. And so, for example,
Right.
I've learned that pizza restaurants, you know, sort of are budget friendly, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Peyton?
Sorry, I think I was a little confused before. I thought we were talking about the response to evaluation assignment.
No, we're going to get to the response to an evaluation.
Okay, all right. Sorry, sorry to interrupt and
Oh, that's all
break
right.
that up for a second.
All right. And Peyton, where would you go tonight? And if you're going to go anywhere, where are you headed?
Probably the Isles Pub and Pizza.
Why?
They got good pizza and it's childhood favorite. So
Okay. All right. So again, you got sentimental reasons. Okay. And it tastes good.
mhm.
Anything beyond those 2 reasons for why you'd want to go there?
I mean, like,
Yeah. And I assume the food is real good too, right? You know.
oh, yeah, they
So
got really good pizza. They got nice garlic cheese bread.
mhm. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All those are valid. I mean, certainly the food's got to be good because if it's not, you know, that's pretty much a deal breaker, right?
Mhm.
Although if it's a sentimental place, we might perhaps put up with more than we might otherwise. Tara, what about you? Where would you go?
Lee's Chicken.
You would, and if I remember right, don't you work there? Okay.
Yeah, it's sentimental. There's a lot, and then there's stories and the people that come there too.
Okay. All right. So for you, it's about the history of the place.
Yeah.
Is its appeal? Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Is there?
yeah.
Go ahead.
My dad used to go there when he was younger, and then my manager used to work with, or went to school with my dad. He's
Okay.
also my landlord, and I live with a coworker too. So like I'm like delved in it.
Okay. Oh yeah, so you got a lot of personal history associated with it. Now, can you think of anything beyond just your own sort of personal connection that makes Lee's Chicken a good place to go?
Mm-mm. No, I wouldn't choose a restaurant to evaluate. I was thinking, my last class I did something like this with a vegetable, and I was thinking
Okay.
maybe I could just do that with.
Well, no, for this one, I suppose if you had a vegetable in front of you, you could do something similar. I, 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 I don't know. I've never had anybody do something like that, but the key thing is you find something, right, and you find these criteria, which is kind of why we're talking about this, right? So if you're looking at Lee's Chicken, certainly, it's one of the places that I like to go because of the atmosphere. I mean, Lee's Chicken, it's like you walk in and it doesn't feel like they've changed anything since Eisenhower was president. It's a time capsule, okay? And that I think is really cool. You've got the ambiance with the music, right? Because I think it's on Friday and Saturday nights. They've got somebody playing the piano or the organ.
Every night, yeah.
Oh, it is every night, and that adds to it. The food is good. It's also not overly expensive, right? It's not, it's budget friendly, and so I could think of all those valuable reasons for why somebody would want to go there.
So what do you mean by criteria? That was my next question to decide what I was going to do. What do you mean by five criteria?
Well, the criteria are basically what you use to arrive at your greater judgment. Okay. So for example, again, this is what we're talking about. So if you're talking about a restaurant, well, why would you want to go there? Okay. Service, food, menu, cost. Okay. All of those things are criteria. Right. Those are reasons, those are main, ways of evaluating that. Okay. And they're going to be individualistic. Okay. Think about, like, if you were going to go car shopping, right? If you're going to go car shopping, what you go through is, okay, I need something that has low miles. I need something that has good gas mileage. I need something that has plenty of room. I need something that, I don't know, looks cool, right? All of these things are criteria, right? So you've got things that if you're going car shopping, it's like, I need this, this, and this.
Bro, this has been on for a whole day.
Right? And so that's what the criteria are. Okay. These are the ways that we choose to evaluate whatever it is. Now, it's also sort of individualistic. Okay. So for example, cost, if you're looking at a restaurant, for some of you may be a more important criteria than for others. Okay. Maybe if you've got a family, of course, the way you evaluate is going to be different in terms of, well, is there a child-friendly menu? If you've got certain allergies, well, does that restaurant cater to those special needs? Again, those are all different criteria that you would use to evaluate, whether or not something is good. Okay. What other restaurants? Bullshit. What about you? What restaurant would you want to go to?
For me, Ramos Pizza.
Oh, Ramos Pizza. Well, and
Yeah.
and why Ramos Pizza?
Like it's kind of pizza, like they sell pizza out there, a kind of restaurant.
Okay. All right. So you like the pizza, right?
Yeah, I like the pizza, and yeah, as you say, it is budget friendly. It's not like overly expensive. And,
Okay.
yeah, I like the pizza.
Right, cost friendly, and I really like that place too. It's I think the only location I know is the one there on 48th Street, just off of Van Dorn, not far from Van Dorn.
Yeah, I think this year they opened the second one. The second one like around the 27, the 48 on the north side.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking about, it's got like a horseshoe shaped bar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and I always like that place too. I actually like the atmosphere and, the fact that it's not a chain and lots of these other things, right? So.
Right. Good.
Who else have we heard from? Down here towards those of you here at the bottom, who?
Her name is Jennifer at the bottom.
Oh, Jennifer. Okay, I'm looking, and I can't sort of hover over and get a name, right? So Jennifer, what is it? Where would you go?
So I don't necessarily know where I'd go. I think I would probably try Single Barrel, but since they're closed. I would choose Single Barrel mostly because like that's my instructor's restaurant.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You're in the food service program, aren't you?
I am.
Right. And see, and that's another thing too, is if you have that background, if you evaluate a restaurant, you're going to be looking at different things than the rest of us, right? Because you're sort of, there are certain things that you're going to be watching for, right?
Definitely.
Right. That, yeah. So again, that's sort of where you bring in this past experience, and hopefully, that informs your judgment. So cool. And and then who do we have here? I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Here at the bottom, this is somebody help me out.
Me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Elio.
So my camera's like up on the top, like my little video, so I wasn't for sure who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I'd probably go to where I was employed at the oven because I haven't had it in like 2 months.
And
Yeah, it's amazing food.
Okay. So again, it's the food. Is there anything other than the food that would
Yeah, so then I'd say the atmosphere totally. The music and the art that they have on the walls is very unique compared to other restaurants. The drinks, like the cocktails, the beer, we have like 1,000 different kinds of wines, like super extensive, super good.
Okay.
Let's see what else. The service itself is pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, and those are all good reasons. Thinking about the decor, I think, is important. I've been to some places where like the decor is like, almost non-existent. It's like they've got nothing but bare walls, and it's like, so even if everything else is great, you kind of feel like you're eating in a barn or something, But right. So all of those things are important sort of criteria. And so as we're looking at this essay assignment, okay, once you figured out what you're going to evaluate, okay, and again, let's pretend that you're evaluating a restaurant, okay, you come up with those 5 criteria, okay, whether it's decor, atmosphere, maybe it's location, right? So, as far as how easy it is to get to or how far away it is from you, okay, and so you come up with those 5 criteria, okay? And then after you have those 5 criteria, then you know what to look for when you do that active observation, okay? So after you figure out how you're going to evaluate it, you go and do your evaluation, okay? And you want to be wherever it is you're evaluating something for at least 45 minutes, maybe even longer, okay? The longer you're there, the more notes you have, the better your whole essay is going to be because you've got more information to work with, okay? Now, understand that there's going to be a lot of information that's going to end up on the cutting room floor. And that's just, that's one of the things that's important is that just because you've written it down in your notes doesn't mean you're married to it. Doesn't mean it ends up in the final draft. So just, keep that in mind and be sure, be prepared to do that. Okay. And as you do this, pay attention to the criteria you've established. Okay. And so you've got all your information. And then you compose the written part of the assignment, okay? So this is where you're translating all the information you've got into your essay. And again, there's a fairly rigid structure. You have an introductory paragraph that establishes the setting, right? All right, this is what's going to be evaluated, and this is, when it is, this is where we're at, all these things. So again, the reader knows where he or she is. All right, so you got that one paragraph. Then you have at least one paragraph for each criteria. Okay, so you've got 5 criteria. If you want to have more than 5, that's perfectly fine. Okay, but each one of those criteria needs its at least one paragraph. Okay, you might have 2 for some paragraphs, right? Especially if you're talking about a restaurant, maybe you're going to spend 2 or 3 paragraphs just on the food, talking about the quality and the quantity and how it's seasoned and how it's cooked and all those wonderful things, right? All right, so you got 1 paragraph, the intro, an additional 5 for discussing the criteria, so we're at 6, and then you have 1 that's a summary that basically wraps it all up, saying, okay, while Mom's Cafe is dirty and the service isn't so great, the atmosphere and great food still make it a great place to go. Okay. Again, this is where you sort of bring it all together. And you also want your summary here where you sort of lay it all out to have some kind of balance. Okay. So even if it's mostly good, it's not going to be perfect. And even if something is maybe really, really bad, it's not completely bad. You know, you want some sort of balance there, just for the sake of credibility. Because if you ever read anything and it's always, you know, it's like all good or all bad, you know, there's a certain part that really wonders, you know, is there something that was overlooked, right? So it's important to kind of keep that in mind, okay? And the only other thing, as you are transferring all of your notes and information to an essay, you're probably going to write in present tense when you're writing down stuff, right? Because you are actively experiencing it in that moment. But when you are telling your readers about it, it is something that is in the past, and so tense just simply seems to need to be adjusted accordingly. So anyway, so that's the essay we're doing. So what thoughts or questions do you have about what it is you're doing or how you may want to do that? Anybody?
Um, s-
One thing before we leave this, I did want to remind, when I say that you have to observe for at least 45 minutes, and again, take notes as you do that. Some people, as sort of as a option, have evaluated where they work, okay? The thing is, though, if you're going to evaluate where you work, you can't evaluate it like an employee, like a somebody who's visiting or a customer, right? So let's say you work at the Runza on North 84th Street. Okay, if you work there, you can't evaluate it like a customer. You have to evaluate it like a job, right? So you'd say, all right, my job at Runza is, you'd want us to look at the criteria like, does it pay good enough? Do I have good enough flexibility? Do I have a good, are my managers, good to work with? All these different kinds of things, right? So you're not going to be evaluating it like a customer. So again, that's simply another way of thinking about this, because, you could evaluate anything. I mean, you could evaluate your car, you could evaluate, your history class, whatever. So,
This is where like our notes or on the descriptive paragraph will come in handy.
well, we're talking about description, it's going to be valuable because what we're talking about here is establishing a structure, right? We're establishing a skeleton. And talking about description, you're going to sort of sharpen some skills that will help you to flesh out that outline, right? So when you're doing your active observation, you're sort of thinking about how to translate this experience that you're having for your reader. So that's how we're doing that.
Can we evaluate, say, the coronavirus?
No, I don't. I can't. I don't know how you would do that. What kind of criteria you would use?
Yeah, gotcha.
So, it's like I say, it's just like evaluating a car for your car shopping or apartment shopping, right? If you've ever been apartment shopping, right, you've got certain criteria, right? It's you have cost, right? You've got available space, you've got location, you've got all of that, right? So we've all been through the evaluation process. In fact, probably it's like several times a day, right? We're making evaluations, we're making judgments based on supporting evidence. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Only you're laying out what all your supporting evidence is, and then you're providing the reader with the conclusion you arrive at based on all that evidence. So, good. Other thoughts or questions? Okay. All right. The other thing I wanted to touch on is and Peyton, you'd asked about this, the response to an evaluation. It's right here. So All right, so one of the questions I know somebody asked was a published review that is not a user review. You know, somebody asked, well, what does that mean? Okay. Well, what I mean by that is, like, you can go on Amazon, right? Let's say you buy, I don't know, a package of socks. Well, you can go and you can see, you know, reviews by people who actually bought those socks that can tell you how good they are or how bad they are, right? That inform maybe whether or not you want to buy those socks, okay? That's a user review. What we want is something that's professional, okay? Something that's written by a professional that is actually published, you know, in some sort of professional way, okay? So as an example, you could look at, if you want to find, for example, examples of restaurant review, you can go to the Lincoln Journal-Star, and here's a review of the Blue Sushi restaurant, okay? And you can see, for example, they have criteria like food, okay? And here's the, you know, here they're evaluating atmosphere. Here they're evaluating the service. Here they're evaluating, you know, whether or not the, you know, they, you know, cater to vegetarian needs or whatever, right? And so what you're doing for this, you're finding a professional review, you summarize it, and then basically answer whether or not it meets your needs, right? You're the audience member. Does this tell you what you need to make a good decision about whether or not to go here? Okay, so that's kind of what I meant by that. But Peyton, you said you had a question about this. What was your question about it?
I think that was the main one. Like what, like, well, you know, like what exactly did you mean by not a user review? Like, what are we looking for, and this and that and the other?
Because see, a user review is usually too short to have anything to work with. You know, a user, what we want to do is I want you to look at an example of somebody else's evaluation that is hopefully well structured, so you can kind of see what the professionals are doing, and, you know, kind of hopefully, you know, learn from that experience. Or, you know, if it is, you know, short on something, again, you kind of learn, well, what should be there, right? Because you learned, well, what somebody else didn't, and it didn't suit your needs, okay? Because that's also what an evaluation does in terms of how it's useful to the reader. It's like, all right, should the reader spend his or her time and money in the same way that you did? And your job is to tell them whether or not they should or shouldn't. So that might be kind of useful thinking about, you know, where that evaluation essay is going in terms of any purpose it might serve. And, are there any other thoughts or questions about the response to an evaluation?
Do you have a specific file you want uploaded, like a docx or?
Yeah, it should be like a .doc or .docx or rich text format. And again, that's in there just so, you know, it's like Google Docs and other kinds of, I've had people use the word processor program from a Mac that doesn't play friendly either. So it's like, you know, it has to be that, and just, you know, makes things simple. Yeah.
I use Google Docs, and my husband helps me transfer it into a docx.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, whatever works for you.
Okay.
Peyton?
Okay, so it says to add a hyperlink to the website.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean?
Well, sort of like here. So you go to the Blue Sushi.
Mm-hmm. I just copy and paste the link.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the hyperlink.
Right.
So yeah, I just need to be able to go to, you know, whatever review that you responded to, so I can kind of take a look at it myself.
So it has to be a Google Docs then, or I mean a Word doc.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Although, you know, Peyton, if you've been working with documents, I don't think that there's anything you haven't not submitted. So I would say, however you've been submitting stuff, it's been working. So keep on doing whatever you've been doing.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Cool. Other thoughts or questions about the response to an evaluation? Okay, cool. All right. Well, like I say, that's not due till tonight. Now, one of the things I sent out an email this morning about today, and I didn't want you to at least take a look at the essay, The Reason College Costs More Than You Think. And with that, this essay is certainly a lot different than the first essay we talked about, the us and them, okay? And one of the ways in which this essay is different is, I think, as you know, you all found out, those of you that submitted it, is that the author doesn't say anything about himself. You know, he doesn't use any first person pronouns. You know, we don't know where he went to school, where he grew up, you know, none of that, right? Because for our purposes, it's not relevant, okay? Now, the other thing too, and if you would, everybody open up your book to page 143, okay? If you've got your textbook, go ahead and open it up, 143, so that way we can all sort of look and point and cite chapter and verse. Okay. Okay, so as you look at that, when I write here in the description about this, it says ignore the information not in the essay itself. Okay, so that means if you're looking on page 143, you have that sentence in italics. It says writing for time in 2014. Well, for our purposes, that stuff doesn't matter. Okay, again, we want to focus on the words that the author wrote. You know, for our purposes right now, you know, when and where it was published doesn't matter. Okay, what we want to focus on is just the words that the author gave us. Okay, and so now, of course, the question is, well, what do we do about an essay where the author doesn't tell us anything about him or herself? How do we evaluate whether or not it's something we can trust? How do we decide that?
What about the research he used? Like he referred a lot of research data over here.
Yeah, he used research.
Exactly, right? So you look at the quantity and the quality of the sources, right? You look at the ingredients, okay? And say, all right, well, how is that? I mean, do we have enough? And the first source that our author uses is what? Where is the first source that the author is either quoting or getting information
From the student and Alex.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alex Nichols, right? And so, and who is Alex Nichols?
A second year senior.
A freshman student?
Yeah, he's a second year senior, right? And so, you know, and this is what we call an anecdote, right? It's a singular example of something, you know, of a lot, right? And so, you know, and an anecdote is only as valuable as it is representative. Okay. And anecdotes don't really mean anything. You've probably heard situations where people are debating, you know, some social issue or another, and all they do is trade anecdotes. Well, so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did that. And, you know, it goes nowhere. It's useless again, unless it's representative. Okay. And since our example here, Alex Nichols, is a second year senior, this is exactly what Marcus is talking about, right? He's talking about, you know, people who have to take that 5th year of college, right? And so who does he do? He goes and he talks to somebody who's doing just that, okay? And so it's a useful example in that way, okay? So there's that. Now, also built into the structure, so we're going to skip ahead here to question 3. It says, where do you find the thesis, okay? And this is okay. Where do you find that one sentence that works as a summary of the whole essay? Where do you find that one sentence summary?
The title.
No, it wouldn't be in the title. We're talking about a one sentence summary.
Thesis?
Yes. Yeah, Emilio, where do you find the thesis?
The first paragraph?
The last sentence.
Well, no, I tell you, the default place, the place where you're most commonly going to find a thesis is in the last sentence of the first paragraph. But that's not where it is in this essay. Anybody?
I'm looking for it.
Okay.
The first sentence.
No, it's not the first sentence. they buried it a little bit here.
Nearly 9 out of 10 freshmen
No,
on
hey,
their bachelor's.
no,
No?
no, Terry, you're close. Actually really close, right? If we look at specifically at that, we've got that's a piece of information. It's evidence. It's supporting detail. But look at the paragraph after that, Tara.
Oh, the annual cost of college.
Yeah, go ahead and if you could.
Income for anxiety and families.
Right, go ahead and read that whole sentence, please.
Out loud?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. That means the annual cost of college, a source of so much anxiety for families and students, often overlooks the enormous additional expense of the extra time it will actually take to graduate.
Right. Is that not the whole essay crammed in one sentence? Right.
Yep.
But no, and that's good. And so you're looking at that like, why is it buried in paragraph 5? Right? Because as we talked about, it usually shows up a lot sooner. Okay. Well, there is a reason for that. And the reason for that is that this essay is built on something called the focus structure. Okay. The focus structure, what it does is if you're going to be talking about something that applies to a lot of people, it's best to start off and have a singular example. Okay. Like with this, right? So if you're talking, if there's a news story about, say, about restaurant workers who have been laid off because of the pandemic, right? What do? They find one person who's been laid off because of it. They talk to them and use that person as sort of an example for all the others, right? And the way this works is there's a quote that's often attributed to Joseph Stalin. It says, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic," right? And that's all about, if all we look at is numbers, the digits kind of blend into each other, right? It's like if we have a single example that we can connect with, we understand the impact. And so that's why this essay starts off with an example, and then it segues into the main story with all this other stuff. Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that the thesis could be anywhere. I just thought had to be at the beginning.
Oh, it usually is. I mean, 80 to 90% of the time you find it in, right at the beginning in that first paragraph. But like I say, it can show up elsewhere. Now, the other part of the whole focus structure is now look at the last 2 paragraphs of the entire essay there on page 146. Okay. So look at the last 2 paragraphs and then see, okay, what does this last quotation, who does that quotation belong to?
Nicholas.
Exactly, right? At the end, we're coming back to the beginning, right? So it's sort of like a circular thing. It's a nice way of putting a bow on it, right? We're coming back. And this example is important because when we're talking about this extra year of college, again, it's easier to just simply think about it as a bunch of numbers and yada, yada, yada. But when we have an example of where this whole policy, where the rubber hits the road, it's like, ultimately, it's like, well, what impact does this have on students, right? And that's one of the things that example does is, again, make us focus on how it applies to the students who are in college. So that's kind of how that whole works. Now, if we're looking at the other information, right? So we've got Alex Nichols. Where else does Marcus take his information from? What other sources does he cite or refer to?
Department of Education.
Right, Department of Education, good. Where else?
There's the college, trying to think right off the top of my head, the study done by one of the college commerces or something like that.
Yeah.
It's the
I can't think of the name.
Higher Education Research Institute.
Yeah, Higher Education Research Institute. And they've got, actually, if you count them all total, there are 10 resources, okay? And they're all, this organization or this, or, and so we've got 10, decent number. Now, what about the quality and reliability of the sources? I mean, are all the sources, do they seem valid and reliable too?
They're all credible.
Right. Okay, and so if we look at, again, the quality and the quantity of the source material, we can reasonably have faith that the information in here is something that we can trust, right? And so that's how we get there. Now, for the audience, I mean, who do you think that Marcus was writing this for? Who does he think that could learn or apply most easily the information that's here?
Parents.
College students.
Students coming from high school and parents.
Exactly, right? These are the students who need to know what they're getting themselves into so that they can adjust as necessary, right? So they can adjust their expectations, if nothing else. And so, right, that would be, what we would consider to be the primary audience, because they can do the most with it, okay? Now, I would say that there's also a secondary audience here. Now, who else could do something with this information that isn't just students or parents? Is there any other group of people that you think could have something to learn from this?
Professors.
Oh, good. And Emilio, why do you think professors could get something out of this?
I guess with the amount of help that students need, I guess, like giving extra help.
Right. So, so that they sort of help understand some of the other things that students are dealing with. And I would sort of extend that beyond as professors to other sort of college administrators, right? To say, all right, is there something we can adjust to deal with this so that students aren't spending that extra year that they don't expect to? So right. So all of those things apply. Now, I would say also that it's because this isn't addressed to college administrators. That's one of the reasons that Marcus doesn't focus on the solutions more, right? Because he's focusing on the students who can't do anything about it but deal with it, okay? If he was writing this to college administrators and teachers, he would focus more on the solutions, right? So that also, again, that knowing that audience does sort of, have a certain impact on who he's writing it to. Now, what about in chapter 14, it talks about what are some of the reasons that students are spending that extra year?
They are taking less college credits than they should.
Taking accidental classes they don't need.
Okay. Right. So they're taking classes maybe they don't need, and changing majors. Right. And one of the key things that they talk about is that they're slowed down, having to retake subjects. Okay. I don't know. I probably, most of you, when you, enrolled at SEC, they had you take tests, right? To see exactly where you were at in terms of your skill level for math and English, right? And, and they do that so they make sure that people are in the right class. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of students who come to find out they've got to take some classes that are sort of, these foundational skills. And it's like, well, I should have learned this in high school. Why didn't I get it then? Why, and there's all kinds of answers that are sort of, again, very individualistic for that. But having to retake stuff, is one of the big reasons. Now, if you look at the solutions, now this is in the third to last paragraph. It's on page 146. And in the third to last paragraph, he does mention some solutions. Now, again, he doesn't focus on them as much because of who his audience is. But what sort of solutions does he say that certain policymakers have recommended? So this is sort of like, well, and what might we do about this, right? What sort of possible solutions does he say?
Taking over like full time.
Okay, Emilio, what'd you say?
I said taking over like full time.
Right. So because 12 hours is full time, and he says, well, you should take 15. Okay. Now, does this seem like a reasonable solution, or at least a reasonable way of dealing with it? What?
No.
Why not, Emilio?
Well, because there's some students that like have to pay for their own living expenses and can't take that extra time off of work.
Right. As you say, I think the outside work responsibilities are one of the big reasons why, for a lot of students, that wouldn't work. You know, just because again, there are bills to pay, right? And so that doesn't work for some, and that's just all right. So that doesn't work. What I heard somebody else chime in about another solution that was here.
I said rapid, going through the requirements quickly.
Right. Yeah, that's speeding students through remedial classes more quickly. Now, how reasonable is that solution? Jennifer, you're shaking your head. You don't think so?
I don't think so because like, well, I think we all were through it because like in order for you to qualify for scholarships, you have to have a minimum of 12. But with the way like, say for instance, like with my program, I had to kind of rush in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
in order to stay on track of that 2-year thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, you aren't learning as much as you should in the class, and you are rushing. You may not be getting assignments done. You might be falling asleep more. You might be not fully comprehending the class of what you should be.
No, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I would say that my own experience is that, right? Here you're talking about foundational skills and we're like, oh, hurry up. Well, you know, if they're foundational skills, we need to spend some time so that they're remembered, right? And that's one of the reasons that SEC went from quarter to semesters was hopefully it's like, all right, well, if we have more time with students, they'll remember more and it'll be more useful for everybody. So, yeah, so no, I completely agree that trying to speed those classes up, you know, that's probably not a good way to go about it. Okay? What's the third solution that we haven't addressed yet? We had go from 12 to 4, take 15 hours, right? Speed up the foundational courses. And then what was the third solution that he has here?
Adding more section.
Oh yeah, right. Adding more sections. Good. And so, and that's one of the reasons that these students end up taking longer is, you know, the class they need doesn't get offered for a while, right? So they're sort of like in limbo. Especially if you're on a program track. Let's say you're going to be a dental assistant and come to find out you need these 2 classes to graduate and they don't offer them for a year, you know, you're in a bad spot. I mean, typically programs try to avoid that, but that's all part of planning ahead, right? To make sure that, you know, you're sort of following a plan so you can do that, okay? So anyway, so those are all solutions that, you know, again, if you had more time, perhaps they would, you know, could use some more attention. And again, perhaps they're not as good as they could be in terms of tackling it. But anyway, so what, any other thoughts or questions about the college costs essay? Okay, all right. Well, we are at the, actually we're a little bit over our hour. So I just wanted to real quickly take a look and as with other previous weeks, kind of give you a heads up for what week 4 will bring. And so you can see week 4, we've got the final draft of the life-changing event essay, the descriptive paragraphs, you've already got that, right? And then the discussion is over Junior's Place. Now, Junior's Place is an essay about a juke joint in Mississippi. Now, a juke joint is basically like a dive bar with live music, and a juke joint is specifically where they would have blues music. And blues music is, you know, from somebody who grew up in Nebraska, we don't have a whole lot of that in Nebraska, except for maybe the Zoo Bar downtown Lincoln, right? But anyway, it's about that, and I have actually a video clip that was taken from a movie. And the footage there was actually shot inside of Junior's Place. And it's a song called, that's actually, I think, a really cool performance, or at least I think so. But anyway, so it kind of gives you an idea also about, you know, supporting details and description and so forth. And that's why I included it. And then for Thursday, we've got also the Observing Wolves responses. So and this reading is not in your textbook, but it is one of the readings from the first year I taught with SEC many years ago. And it was such a good reading that I thought brought up so many important things that we will also be touching on again and again throughout the semester that I'm still using. And because the setting is in northern Canada, and I know I've never been to northern Canada, right? So when I first read this, they're talking about northern Canada, and I imagine 3 feet of snow everywhere, okay? But that's not the way it is. And so Observing Wolves is actually taken from a book called Never Cry Wolf, written by Farley Mowat, and Disney turned it into a movie in the early 80s, okay? And here's the trailer for that movie, so you can kind of watch that and kind of get an idea or visualize what this corner of the world looks like. And as you can see, there's snow around, but you know, it's not like everything's under a whole bunch of snow. So anyway, so we've got that. And then we've got a comma splice worksheet. It's not due until the following Tuesday. And that's just because run-ons and comma splices are so common. And I know when I hand back your life-changing event essays, there's going to be a bunch of them. Everybody's going to have at least 1 or 2. And so we're going to tackle the comma splices so that when you see a comma splice, you know what they are and you know how to deal with them. So anyway, so that is the week ahead. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about anything before we dismiss?
Nothing immediately comes to mind.
Okay.
For
All
me
right.
anyway.
All right. Well, hey, you know, if something comes up, you know how to get in touch. So, hey, it was a great meeting. Great seeing all of you. And like I say, if you have any thoughts or questions, just drop me a line. Okay.
All right.
All right. Cool. Hey, it was a great meeting. See you all next week.
See you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.